What's up, Taiwan? I'm Jaime Ocon with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Police in southern Taiwan have detained the organizer of a recall campaign for allegedly violating personal data laws. Shu Sangxian is being held incommunicado by the Kaohsiung District Court. He is suspected of forging signatures on recall petitions against ruling Democratic Progressive Party lawmakers Xu Zhijie and Huang Jie. Prosecutors say he also colluded with other campaigners to destroy evidence. It comes amid widespread efforts to unseat politicians from both the DPP and the opposition Kuomintang. But several campaigns are now under investigation for alleged misconduct, including petitions containing the signatures of dead people. Taiwanese firms are pushing for a more comprehensive plan to respond to paused U.S. tariffs, saying government subsidies are not enough.
要纾困的话，多少钱都不够啦。但是我觉得那只是一次性的。我们如何能够整合出一个让我们要的是工作啦，不只是钱啦。有一些法规的这个松绑啦。
Officials have been consulting industry representatives across the country on how to brace Taiwan's export-dependent economy for the 32% tariffs, which have been paused for 90 days. Premier Zhong Rongtai says he will share the full details of a 20-point response plan soon. The cabinet has already pledged almost $3 billion in subsidies to help local businesses. Taiwan's military is looking to buy 30 more Blackhawk helicopters from the U.S. and upgrade the ones it has on hand to better carry out attack missions. This would involve buying and converting more missiles and rockets. But is this the best move for Taiwan's defense? To find out, I spoke to Raymond Guo, a security analyst at the Rand Corporation. So Taiwan wants to upgrade and purchase new Blackhawk helicopters for the Army. How would this help Taiwan's military?
The Blackhawk helicopters, especially these attack variants, could be useful. So you can think of them as very mobile, highly mobile attack platforms carrying air-to-ground missiles, rockets. These can be very effective in sort of a counter-lodgement mission. So if the Chinese were to land on Taiwan, you could send a flight of these Blackhawks through and kind of wipe out either the ships or the landing vehicles. If there's an invasion, China's going to be launching a whole bunch of missiles. They're going to be trying to take out infrastructure. They're going to try to take out responding Taiwanese units. These Blackhawks could potentially fill that kind of gap, that if tanks or wheeled vehicles are having difficulty getting to the beachhead.
When we talk about a conflict over Taiwan, one concern is that Taiwan would have a difficult time protecting its airspace. Would that also mean that these helicopters are vulnerable to that?
The problem is that helicopters can be relatively easy to shoot down. So even though the Chinese will be attacking infrastructure, they're also going to have up a whole bunch of missiles to take out any kind of aircraft, fixed wing or rotary. And so what you need to do is that if you want to have this kind of, not just a system, but like a whole unit devoted to this sort of counter-lodgement mission using these Blackhawks, they also have to be well protected. So they're going to need, the Taiwanese will need to establish at least air superiority so that these helicopters can navigate and operate more freely. You'll need anti-aircraft missiles so they can shoot down any sort of intercepting Chinese jets. It adds certain capabilities, sure, but it will also add a whole bunch of requirements to make sure that these helicopters can actually carry out the missions that the Taiwanese seem to be aiming for.
Taiwan's military has also put an emphasis into this capability to respond quickly to whatever threats it faces. Do these helicopters help with that strategy?
Obviously, if the Chinese are landing special forces, then you're going to want to have these Blackhawks on hand to be able to really rapidly respond. But, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the maintenance, the upkeep, the training that's all involved in these helicopters? Is that worth it? I mean, you could get some of that by just pre-positioning Taiwanese forces around the major landing beaches.
That was Rand Corporation analyst Raymond Guo. In Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russian attacks have not stopped, despite Russian President Vladimir Putin's announcement of a temporary Easter truce. It comes as the U.S. increases pressure on both countries to negotiate a ceasefire, saying if there's no progress soon, it'll step away from the table. Joyce Tseng reports.
cheers ring out in Ukraine as prisoners of war captured by Russian troops return home in the largest prisoner swap in the 3-year conflict. Ukraine and Russia each saying they returned 246 captured soldiers. And in another apparent show of goodwill, Russian President Vladimir Putin calling unilaterally for a temporary ceasefire to mark the Easter holiday.
Руководствуясь гуманитарными соображениями, сегодня с 18:00 часов до 00 часов с воскресенья на понедельник российская сторона объявляет пасхальное перемирие.
But just hours after Putin's Easter truce was announced, air raid sirens echoed throughout Kyiv. In a tweet, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russian attacks have continued, quote, on several frontline sectors, and therefore there is no trust in words coming from Moscow. Zelensky also called on Putin to extend the pause in fighting beyond Easter to show Moscow is ready to truly engage in peacemaking, something that's becoming more elusive for the people of both Ukraine and Russia.
Ночью ми чекаємо в Україні, а особливо в Києві, прильоти ракет. Тому перемир'я не буде.
В Украине не верю, не будет никакого перемирия. Будут обстрелы и так далее.
Last month, Russia rejected a 30-day ceasefire agreed to by Ukraine and its largest arms backer, the United States. U.S. President Donald Trump recently saying he will stop trying to broker peace if there's no progress soon.
We're going to just take a pass.
Some Europe experts say Putin's Easter truce could be a way to appease Trump, who has shifted away from Washington's clear stance in support of Ukraine. But the Trump administration is reportedly now becoming more frustrated with Moscow.
Both sides at this point are concerned as to how they look in the eyes of the U.S. administration, right? Who is more reconciliatory, who is pushing for more peace. Smart move on the Ukrainian side, I would say. It's a counter-offer so that Putin does not look here how like the main, peacemaker.
Geopolitical analysts say the U.S. appears to still hold leverage over both Ukraine and Russia. But with trust running low across the board, the war in Ukraine still rages on. Chris Ma and Joyce Sin for TaiwanPlus.
The United States and Iran have agreed to begin drafting a framework for a potential nuclear deal. This comes after the second round of talks between representatives of these two countries in Rome. They've agreed to hold expert-level meetings next week. The U.S. wants Iran to stop producing highly enriched uranium, which it says could be used to make nuclear weapons. Iran says its nuclear program is peaceful, but is willing to discuss moderate limits on it in return for easing U.S. sanctions. U.S. President Donald Trump scrapped a previous nuclear deal with Iran during his first term and has threatened to attack the country if it doesn't reach a new agreement soon. In January, China's DeepSeek debuted a new generative AI model that took the world by storm. The company claimed its AI assistant was as good or better than U.S. rivals like OpenAI's ChatGPT and could be trained at a fraction of the cost. The development also raised doubts about the U.S. approach of slapping export controls on China and stoked national security concerns. To learn more, Chris Gorin spoke with Matt Pearl, an analyst at the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
Over there at CSIS, you recently released a report on DeepSeek and its geopolitical implications, including some previously unreported information about chip smuggling and the specific technologies that they're using. So for our audience, maybe just remind us a little bit about why DeepSeek caused such a panic when it first came out, and also the main findings of this report.
Before DeepSeek came out, we thought that the non-PRC companies like Meta and Anthropic and OpenAI really had moats, which means that they were protected against other AI players because of the scale of the investments they could make, their access to very high-end chips, and their ability to consume energy. And so we thought that all of those things really meant that it would be difficult or impossible for PRC companies to do the same. And what we discovered with DeepSeek is that the PRC companies are becoming very innovative. We saw this with Huawei, right, where they were cut off from Western chips. Some of them are smuggled in, obviously, or they obtain illicitly. But the reality is that they also get very creative about using lower end chips in order to do these workloads and to make advancements. And so in the case of DeepSeek, we saw basically them leveraging the same sorts of techniques that Huawei did in terms of using these lower end chips very efficiently. And so it does raise questions about the effectiveness of export controls.
Where are U.S. export controls effective at slowing down Chinese AI development, and where do they seem to sort of be failing at that goal?
So I would say that it's not clear that the export controls are slowing down development significantly. I think if you look at what the export controls do, they impose costs, meaning that it's more expensive. It can be challenging for the PRC. They have to find workarounds, and so it can make things more costly for them in some ways. But ultimately, if they're determined to develop these models using some smuggled chips, some stockpiled chips, as well as some lower end chips, they're going to be able to do it in relatively fast time.
So ultimately, do you feel that these export controls on chips and AI diffusion are an effective policy and a wise policy moving forward?
I think that they should be one tool in the arsenal that the U.S. and its allies and partners use. I do think that, as I mentioned, it's important to balance the benefits and the costs. And when I say benefits, I mean that you're making it more difficult for the PRC. But it should be one tool. It's not a panacea. And I think that there was a view that it was a panacea. You need to combine different tools, right? Like boosting production in U.S. allies and partners. You need to use R&D to make sure that we run faster and develop better technology than the PRC. We need to really protect our IP and ensure, there are all kinds of efforts, but we need to be careful about taking them too far.
Simply put, do you think that DeepSeek is a national security risk?
Yes, absolutely. Particularly because at this point, anyone can still use it. So it could be a vector for all kinds of things, spying. It would be very easy to use it to leverage a malicious cyber attack if the PRC wanted to. And so as well as misinformation and trying to do influence campaigns that change perceptions of the PRC. And it hasn't been banned in the US. Now, President Trump could ban it under the same law that Congress passed to ban TikTok. He would just have to determine that DeepSeek is a national security risk. When I speak to people in a lot of our allies and partners in those governments, it's a very similar situation to Huawei, which is they recognize this is a risk, they recognize the threat, but they're also worried about retaliation from the PRC. In the case of businesses, it presents risks of IP theft that they should really take into account. Once they're installing DeepSeek and using it on their IT systems, and it could be a vector for obtaining access to their actual operational technology.
That was CSIS analyst Matt Pearl. You can watch the full interview with him on Zoom In, Zoom Out. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, we'll leave you with the images of Japanese artist Nara Yoshitomo's exhibition in Berlin. I'm Jaime Ocon. Take care, and we'll see you next time. For more stories from here in Honolulu, Hawaii, and around the world, make sure to visit us on social media.